Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
And good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 5th of January. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather information. You can do that easily by giving us a call at the Weather Info line at 800-472-0391 or find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. And during the day, you'll find more information on social media, whether that's on Facebook at NWS Alaska, on Twitter. Each office has their own account as well as an NWS Alaska account. But you can find the others at NWS Fairbanks, NWS Anchorage, and NWS Juneau. And on YouTube, several of our offices have accounts there. You can always search for Alaska Weather or AKwx TV for short in the search bar in YouTube. And you'll get a look at this show a little bit later on in the evening. If you miss a part or come in late from the boat, you can certainly just kind of move the slider along and get to the marine forecast if that's what you need, or the aviation forecast is available as well. Here's a look at the hazardous weather as we go into tonight and tomorrow. You'll notice the really big focus is obviously in the western part of Alaska tonight. And some of this has to deal with falling snow. There has not been a whole lot of snow in south central or southeast. The focus right now is really shifted on some of the western communities. And some of the hillsides are helping to shape that weather a little bit more. We've got a pretty decent area of low pressure moving back into the Bering. The story is really unchanged over the last several weeks. And that focus is going to push anywhere from 5 to about 9 inches of snow across parts of the upper Kobuk and lower Noatak valleys there, all the way in that region, anywhere from about 5 to 9 inches of snow. The red shaded areas are winter storm warnings. And around the interior of the Seward Peninsula, as well as the parts of the northern coast into the Kotzebue Sound region, we're expecting some of those regions to see some stronger gusts of wind as well. So that could lower visibility and also aid to the snow production. Now, as we get into the upper Kobuk and lower Noatak, the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys, I should say, this is a winter weather advisory, and that stretches all the way down into the middle and lower Yukon valleys there, where we're still also looking at winter weather advisories and lesser amounts of snow. The further south you go, the lesser snow you'll see, probably about 1 to 3 inches of snow, and for places like Grayling and around the Nulato Hills up toward Galena, amounts should be a little bit less as well. Now for the upper Kuskokwim, we're expecting some gusty winds, just a little bit more than a stiff breeze, nothing much to write home about there, but gusts could reach upwards of 45 miles per hour for a time tonight and into tomorrow. And as you look out toward the Bering Strait coastline in St. Lawrence Island, winter weather advisory there for blowing snow again, so that will continue as we head through tonight and into tomorrow. Look a little bit further south into the Aleutians, and we're talking about wind. High wind watch for the central chain. Looks like for areas from AKwx west, you have the opportunity of experiencing some stronger winds as we get into tomorrow. Again, those gusts could pick up to about 75 miles per hour. Now, starting up early in the morning around 5 o'clock, a high wind warning will be in effect for the eastern Aleutians. Those winds will be coming in from the southeast, while areas west of AKwx will be dealing with more of a westerly flow gusting from about 75 miles per hour at its peak. So those southeasterly winds and the high wind warning for the eastern chain could bring those winds up to 75 miles an hour as well. So the low pressure obviously is going to be making a path right about through here, and you'll see that on the surface charts in just a little bit. So it's wind in the chain, snow and wind in parts of the west in the Kotzebue Sound region as well as the Seward Peninsula. And again, most of the active weather well across the west. And guess what? Satellite picture will tell us exactly the same tale. Very dry conditions in southeast over the last couple days, and you can see there's pretty much a wall right here. There's a boundary locking all the active weather well out to the west. And in fact, high pressure is in control of a large chunk of southeast. And in the meantime, you look up toward the interior, and a lot of what we're seeing here in this dark gray is actually a clear sky. It's just colder air, and that's where that cold air is lurking right now across some of the upper Yukon and into the Yukon Territory itself. Up across areas north of the Yukon Valley to where the Brooks Range and the North Slope, you can see there's certainly a wealth of cloud cover, and the same goes for the western coast with low pressure working its way north and west. We have another surge of low pressure just east of the Kamchatka Peninsula, another wave working its way northward toward the Aleutians tonight, and that's what's bringing the wind for the central and eastern chain. As this makes a path to the north and east, it will quickly work its way back to the west as we get toward the latter part of the week. So here's our snowmaker across the west, and you can see that there hasn't been a whole lot of precipitation just yet, but many areas will be seeing that increase as we head into the evening and overnight hours, and many of the warnings and advisories will begin around 6 o'clock tonight or so. So again, watch for the heaviest snowfall around the interior of the Seward Peninsula, around the Nulato Hills, and up around the Kobuk and Noatak valleys there. That'll be the focus for most of our precipitation tonight. In the meantime, South Central is seeing a relatively dry pattern here, and with that southerly flow, it certainly is warmer. Doesn't look like we have any great opportunities for any focused precipitation in the near term. But if you're around the Kenai Peninsula, especially some of the higher terrain and the coastal areas, you have an opportunity for some rain and snow. In some areas, we're seeing that today. High pressure east of the Alcan was sitting at 1,023 millibars. We've got a front across the north coast, and with that pressure gradient a little bit tighter, areas of blowing and drifting snow are expected to develop there in the next couple days. A trough of low pressure still exists from St. Lawrence Island all the way through the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta and into Bristol Bay. Some pockets of rainfall there across the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula. And our next big wave of low pressure is still sitting at 978 millibars. That's south of the central Aleutians. That's going to take a pretty quick jog northward tonight and rapidly deepen to a storm force low at 947 millibars. We're expecting rain and snow showers in the vicinity, but you're probably going to notice the wind a little bit more. Again, those gusts up to 75 miles per hour. There's a high wind watch out for the early morning hours of the central Aleutians, and at this point we're fairly confident about the high winds expected in the eastern Aleutians. And again, those too could be up to 75 miles an hour, but they'll be a little bit more from the southeast. As we get into Wednesday, notice that low's down to 942 millibars, and at this point it will be at its strongest. After that, it rapidly fills in. High pressure is moving westward into the middle Yukon Valley at 1,013 millibars, so things are pretty calm and quiet and mostly clear. In fact, the sky should be clearing up even more as we go through the day for many locations there, so enjoy the sunshine while you have it. Across the eastern Gulf, a 999 millibar low south of the Haida Gwaii region. That is going to help to keep most of southeast pretty calm and dry. There will be some gusts in the northern Lynn Canal. Don't be surprised to see those winds pick up around Juneau and northward for sure toward Haines and Skagway. And a pocket of rain or snow showers is certainly possible across the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula into Prince William Sound. But the focus obviously is out in the west and the chain and the unsettled weather out there. We do see drier weather working up the west and south coast, and with that we expect some changes in the sea ice, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Thursday's forecast shows high pressure taking a jog northward, still holding its own at about 1,023 millibars. Pockets of rain and snow showers may pick up a little bit more around Prince William Sound and just offshore of southeast, but right now southeast still looks to be pretty nice there through the end of the week. A 955 millibar low is trying to pick up the pieces and take over the western Gulf. This will intensify. This will push more wet weather northward toward the Alaska Peninsula. And out west, our big low that was down south is quickly moving to the north and west and pulling in drier air even further west across the west and southwestern coast. Some pockets of rain and snow across the YK and some snow showers for the central and western chain, but the high wind should let up pretty quickly. And again, the focus for most of the active weather will continue moving even further west. Temperatures today, back in the 20s and 30s. So, okay, it's not maybe the best day in the world as far as temperatures go for southeast, but you did get some sunshine, so enjoy the cool and clear while you have it. Again, some breezy conditions developing there. As we get into Prince William Sound, 30s and 40s for many there around Middleton Island, 43, 41 in Homer, 36 in Anchorage, about the same around Talkeetna, and 12 for Fairbanks today. Northway and Eagle, a little bit of a different story depending on which end you're looking at. 15 in Eagle, 15 below in Northway this afternoon, 7 above in Fort Yukon. About the same there for Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, 16 in Kaktovik, 11 in Barrow. Around Kotzebue Sound, we saw temperatures in the upper 20s and lower 30s, and it was a very warm start for the day. I believe around Kotzebue today, temperatures there were fairly warm. In fact, it was one of the warmer starts you've seen on the record books for this date. 33 As you look at Nome today, 37 in Unalakleet, and about 37 for Grayling as well, 27 in McGrath, 30 in Galena, 35 in Bethel. Bristol Bay temperatures in the mid-30s with the Alaska Peninsula in the mid to upper 30s, many closer to 40 like AKwx, and 35 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, mid-30s for the Central Chain, and down to 26 way out in Attu. Now, overnight low temperatures will be the coldest for the central and eastern interior as high pressure is in charge there. But where we've got those southerly winds and more clouds and precipitation, temps will pretty much hold in the 20s, even as far north as Cape. As you get into Kotzebue Sound and even northward toward Wainwright, temps are only in the teens, so you can really see that dramatic change in the weather pattern there as close as McGrath, a big temperature change there up to 15 degrees. For teens and 20s for southeast, Prince William Sound looking at 20s. Gulf Canada and many in the Copper River Basin will be colder, might even start out with some fog in the morning. 29 around St. Paul and lower 30s for the Central Chain. With wind tomorrow, look for more clouds and a chance of precipitation for the Alaska Peninsula and the Eastern Chain. 30s and 40s there for you, holding in the upper 20s and lower 30s for most along the west coast, even in the interior west, looking in the upper 20s and lower 30s into Kotzebue Sound. So it'll be a pretty mild day for you. Upper 20s around Barrow, teens around Kaktovik, warming up as well, with temperatures holding in the single digits, maybe a few below zero for Arctic Village and Fort Yukon, Northway only at 3 below, so not too bad for you. 20s and 30s for South Central and mid-20s to even close to 40 degrees around Sitka and Annette and Ketchikan for your daytime highs tomorrow. Flying weather is going to focus on the west and the north with IFR conditions mainly due to blowing snow or the risk thereof for the Barrow region and westward. And you're also going to see IFR conditions west of Adak and south of and west of Sand Point and southeast of Dutch Harbor. Otherwise, MVFR conditions will be spotty in the Gulf and across the lower and middle Yukon, with conditions probably getting worse before they get better. AKwx Pass and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions throughout most of your day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, again, looking for some improvements as we get on through the day. The worst of it will be on the western side. VFR conditions on the east, Rainy Pass included there. Windy Pass right now, we expect to see VFR. Same goes for Isabel Pass throughout your day. Metasta Pass and Tanita Pass expected to be visual, and Portage Pass looks pretty good tomorrow with improving sky conditions there. And Chilkoot and White Pass also expected to be VFR. Now, warmer air aloft is working northward. That's up across the North Slope and the eastern and upper parts of the Yukon Valley in Alaska. There's a warm air pocket just south of Yakutat and southeast of Prince William Sound with levels up to 6,000 feet. So certainly warm air is accumulated there. And you can see the surface freezing line is working itself northward with that strong surge of southerlies working across the west coast. So no doubt we have a better chance for some icing in some places there, mainly above 3,000 to 4,000 feet. And the strongest area of icing potential there could reach occasional moderate. There's some pockets of light to isolated moderate across the eastern Gulf and across the Brooks Range west of Adigan and AKwx Pass there. Most of that will be above 2,000 feet. The jet stream shows our weather pattern, and it's trying to move around a little bit, but it's probably resetting more than it is moving. You can see our trough of low pressure across the Gulf that's kind of kept things a little bit unsettled. It's kind of shifted into a locked position right now. High pressure sitting across the upper Yukon and drawing in that southerly flow. And then here's our resetting pattern here. This has been the dominant player for the last several weeks, and it looks like it's going to stay as the dominant player for the next couple weeks at least. So what you see is what you get. The focus mainly in the west, warm and somewhat dry conditions across many for south central, unless that pattern shifts just a little east, and then we get into a wetter pattern for some of the Gulf regions there. At 9,000 feet, we've got the southerly flow clearly intact here, about 10 to 20 knots coming in from the south across the west coast. Wind speeds up to 50, even 70 knots, 75 knots in fact, as you get out toward Atka, with low pressure moving across the Central Chain tomorrow. At 3,000 feet, our wind speeds again strongest across the west coast, anywhere from 40 to 50 knots across the Bristol Bay region, and westward you can see the wind speeds picking up to about 60 to 65 knots and then reversing course to more of a northerly flow in the western chain. High pressure is really slamming on the brakes across the Gulf Coast. Light winds across southeast, some of the stronger winds in fact around the Dixon entrance coming in from the continent around 30 knots or so, and then slowing down as they move across the northern Gulf Coast. Southerlies across the Nulato Hills helping to aid snow production there, and still staying up there across the North Slope, 30 to 40 knots. So turbulence potential, hit and miss across the Brooks Range. Watch for some occasional moderate there below 8,000 feet and across some of the western hills and into the interior of the Seward Peninsula region. Probably running into some isolated severe, including the Pribilofs and around St. Matthew, and across some of our central and eastern Aleutians. Certainly with high wind watches and warnings in place, you would expect that, especially for low-level wind shear. Again, that'll be below 4,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back in just a few minutes with the rest of your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Okay, go ahead. Overboard! I'll get my swim.
Overboard on the starboard! Don't take your eye off of him! I'll get the signal fall! Still got him in sight? Okay.
Where'd he go?
Still got him! Okay.
Hold on. Okay.
Get the line on as soon as you can. He's got something to hold on to.
Okay, a little more to starboard.
Okay. Hard starboard.
How you doing, Hank? Okay? Good.
Okay, give him a hand there.
Come in line.
Put the line again. Line up there. Okay, throw. Let me know when you got the line up. Hydraulics going on.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, we got it. Coming up.
Got it.
People who live in the north, who live, work, and play on or near cold water or in cold weather, should be ready to deal with hypothermia. To know what it is, know how to prevent it, how to recognize it, and how to treat it. Whether you realize it or not, most of us have been hypothermic at one time or another. When was the last time you shivered from the cold? Did it take hours or just a few minutes? Hypothermia can develop slowly or very quickly. Hypothermia is an injury that is just beginning to be understood by modern scientists. Hypothermia is the lowering of the body core temperature. The core is the critical inner portion of the body, including the heart, brain, and lungs. The core is where life remains if there is any chance for survival. Before you can understand hypothermia, you need to know that the circulatory system controls the body temperature much like a hot water heating system does in a home. When the arms or legs get cold, the core sends warm blood out to rewarm them. The core can't afford to send out more warm blood without cooling itself. It then reduces blood flow to these areas in order to minimize its own heat loss. However, if too much heat is lost from the body, it will die. We can prevent hypothermia in two ways: by adding heat or by making our shelter more efficient to prevent the loss of body heat. Clothes are our most efficient shelter to protect our body from the environment. If our clothing is adequate, our body core temperature can be maintained by body heat alone and not require another heat source. If our clothing is inadequate, we add a little water, a little wind. You can see how dangerously cold people can get. The main areas of the body to protect from heat loss are the head, neck, armpits, sides, and groin, because they are the areas of greatest heat loss. The old saying to cover your head when your feet get cold makes a lot of sense if you know that over half of the body heat loss is through the head. You know, it's really sad that people spend hundreds of dollars on recreational gear, but only a fraction of that on adequate clothing. Clothing that could protect them from a dangerous and common killer, cold. The best prevention for hypothermia is to stay dry. If you're wet, get dry. If you're in the water, get out, or at least get as much of your body out as possible. Water will rob the body's heat 25 times faster than air at the same temperature. If you're in the water without a survival suit, to slow heat loss, keep the head and neck out of the water. The best way to do that is to wear some type of protective flotation device or lifesaver that keeps the head and neck up. Another important posture protects the groin and armpits from cold water circulation. This is the heat escape lessening posture called the help position. For a group, a good posture is to huddle. It protects the armpits and groin and keeps non-flowing water in the center, which increases survival time. A posture to avoid is one called drown-proofing. This is where you put your hands behind your back, you deep breathe, and you bob underwater. This will work in warm water. In these cold Alaska waters, it won't work any time of the year. You actually lose body heat faster because your neck and your head is underwater. You can also keep more of your body out of the water by clinging to something. Another person, a part of the boat, a log, even a floating dead friend. He can save your life. If help is close by, don't swim. It will reduce your survival time in cold water. Each stroke you swim circulates cold water around your body. Your ability to swim becomes less each time you stroke. In midwinter 30 to 33 degree water, it's doubtful that a person could swim more than 50 feet.
Okay, take him in. Get those clothes off him.
How do you recognize that someone is hypothermic? The symptoms of hypothermia include feeling cold, shivering, the loss of coordination, slurred or unusual speech, confusion, impaired judgment, and near the end, feelings of warmth and euphoria, sort of a natural high. In time, the person becomes unconscious. The heart beats erratically, resulting in death by what appears to be a heart attack. In the field, you don't have a means of measuring body core temperature and other vital signs. You cannot rely on symptoms alone to decide how severe the case of hypothermia is. For example, some people don't shiver, and also the victim may not believe he has hypothermia. If a person is improperly sheltered from cold or wet conditions, and he might be hypothermic, it makes good sense to treat him for hypothermia.
Hey, Red, give me a hand.
Good thing is, I think I've seen this one before. Red turns out he's just fine. He's going to recover. Good news. Here's a look at the sea ice, and with the strong south and easterly winds moving off the shore, we're going to take a lot of this ice that's along the western coast and rough it up quite a bit and push a lot of this westward. So you're going to see higher concentrations in the west over time in the next several days than what we see across Norton Sound and across the northern parts of the Yukon Delta there. So watch for changes in that regard as we go ahead. Here's a look for a southeast marine forecast. Northerlies will be a little stronger tomorrow with winds coming out of the north, 30 knots with a 6-foot sea. North and easterlies moving through the central and southern interchannels at 20 knots with a 4 to 7-foot sea, and offshore winds across the outer coast from about 15 to 20 with 9 to 10-foot seas there. As we get into Thursday, a little bit of a change, more of a southeasterly flow coming up the outer coast at 20 knots with seas around 7 feet in the north to 11 feet outside of the Dixon entrance. We'll keep our northerly winds across the Lynn Canal, and that northerly flow will shift a little bit further southward toward Petersburg with 5-foot seas there. Easterlies moving across the Clarence Strait at 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. For south central, higher gusts just outside of Prince William Sound and closer to the coast. That could mean 25 knots sustained. 9-foot seas there. Northwesterlies inside of Prince William Sound. Northerlies coming down Cook Inlet and west of the Barrens at 10 to 20 knots. Northeasterlies inside of Shelikof Strait, and we'll keep more of a variable flow east of Kodiak Island with a 9-foot sea there. As we get into Thursday, the flow reverses to more of an east and northeasterly flow. Look for a little bit stronger flow west of the Barrens, 25 to 30 knots in that region with an easterly flow east of Kodiak Island, and northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound with a 3-foot sea for Thursday. Southeasterlies will be the strongest on the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula with higher gusts there, again with storm force winds in the vicinity as low pressure is moving across the Aleutian. So we'll see stronger southeasterlies on Wednesday here, 45 to 50 knots sustained with 17 to 22-foot seas, considerably lesser wind and seas around Bristol Bay and areas from Castle Cape to Chignik. As we get into Thursday, you can see winds already diminishing as low pressure is moving back to the north and west. So we get more of an easterly flow here from Bristol Bay all the way down the coast with 6 to 10 foot seas, 35 to 40 knot winds across the Pacific coast on Thursday with higher gusts as you head out into the western Gulf, and that'll be for Thursday for the Alaska Peninsula. Wednesday in the central and eastern chain, again a high wind watch for the central Aleutians and a high wind warning for the eastern Aleutians there, with winds coming in from the south and east and becoming westerly with time across the central chain. Again, storm force winds expected with this, with 40 to 50 knots in most areas, a few as high as 55 knots sustained. 21 to 28 foot seas, even 30 foot seas there between Atka and Nikolsky, 22 foot seas as you head out toward Kiska. By Thursday, winds are moving into more of a west and southwesterly direction as low pressures pulling to the north and west. Look for seas and winds to diminish to about 35 to 40 knots and seas down to about 22 to 23 foot seas there in the Bering Sea coast, 20 to 21 foot seas along the Pacific Sea coast as we get into Thursday. Now across the west coast, south and easterly winds coming up the YK Delta over Nunivak Island and towards St. Lawrence with 20 to 40 knots there. You'll see even stronger winds around St. Matthew and the Pribilofs, 45 to 50 knots. For Wednesday, the winds in the Pribilofs from the south and east with a 26-foot sea. You'll see some improvements in some areas as we get into Thursday. The Pribilofs holding onto those stronger winds all the way up towards St. Matthew. Again, as low pressure is still fairly close to home and moving out to the west and northwest. The good news is it is filling in and will weaken as we get into Thursday afternoon and Friday. Look for a strong offshore flow from St. Lawrence Island all the way to the Kuskokwim Delta, anywhere from 25 to 40 knots. Across the North Slope, south and easterly winds around 15 in the eastern Beaufort Sea coast to about 30 knots from the south in the Kotzebue Sound region. That becomes easterly and 20 knots for Thursday, and winds diminish across the Beaufort Sea coast and the northern parts of the Chukchi Sea as we get into Thursday afternoon. Here's a look at a recap for tonight's weather. Quiet conditions in the interior, a mainly clear sky for many over the next couple of days there, but increasing wind across the central and eastern chain, and winter storm warnings and advisories for the west, as much as 5 to 9 inches of snow across the lower Kobuk and the upper Noatak valleys there in that entire region. The Nulato Hills also expecting accumulation tonight, and snow and blowing snow could lower your visibility, so be careful if you're traveling in the west. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.